This is a presentation from the Supernaut Network.
Welcome to the Imaginarium, the show where art and passions for creativity intersect and combine for a conversation that can only be found in the Imaginarium. I'm your host, Scott Colbert, and this week's guest is the author and creator of kid-tested and rabbi-approved Maccabee on the Mantle, Abra Liberman Garrett. And welcome to the Imaginarium, Abra.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start talking about the Maccabee on the Mantle and how that came to be?
I am a mother of two. I am also a writer. I am also a yoga teacher, and I worked for several years teaching preschool at a temple here in Dallas where we are members called Temple Emmanuel. And I have considered myself to be basically a creative person who's drifted in and out of creative fields most of my life, or most of my working life, I should say. So it has been really fun to reconnect with that aspect again after being home with the kids and a little foray into corporate America and things like that.
And I suppose it's a lot easier to spark that creativity when you have kids, being how imaginative they can be.
Oh, it is so much easier, and I feel like every day I'm learning something about thinking off the beaten path from my kids. When my daughter was 3 years old, her imaginary friend was a little girl named Delapia who had rainbow hair, rainbow eyes, and she smoked, and she was 2 years old. It was just like, that is so cool that, like, I mean, and my daughter Charlie, her grandfather smoked, my husband's father, and we'd always talk about how you never want to smoke and this and that. So I think it kind of had this allure to her that she assigned to her imaginary friend, not necessarily understanding that a 2-year-old wouldn't probably smoke, but it opened up. It was just like every time I heard from my kids, I was like, sure, that could happen. And all these new neural paths were constantly being opened for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's nice to see parents who encourage the creativity rather than kind of box it up and say no.
I think that the nice thing about the time we're in now is everyone is so open to being creative and to facilitating that in children, and that, not that this is my favorite phrase in the world by any means, but that whole think outside the box mentality has become so ubiquitous and so embraced, where I feel like when I was growing up myself in the 80s, you more wanted to fit inside a box, and I was never that real rigid learner like they liked in school. I had to kind of teach myself differently, learn differently, and it wasn't quote unquote normal then. So I love that my kids are growing up in a time where, like you said, creativity is more encouraged, being different, being able to acknowledge what you need, even if it's not in alignment with most people.
Well, you said that you did a lot of creative things. What other outlets for creativity do you or did you have aside from writing?
Well, teaching yoga is actually very creative for me because there's a choreographed aspect to a vinyasa flow, which is what I teach. Teaching in the preschool was a creative outlet for me as well, because interacting with the children, you had to position everything differently so it was appropriate to the individual, the child you were working with. And then being a mom, like I said, that's opened a lot of windows of creativity. And it was right after college, I went right into corporate America, and I recognized I was discontent, but I kind of thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. And in retrospect, I realized I needed something more creative, more of a creative outlet to really nourish my soul, because I was just going through the motions and it wasn't healthy for me cognitively.
And so is that what got you into the writing?
Yes. So I had been in sales, and I was able to transition from a sales position to where I was writing. I was in Austin. I had just graduated from University of Texas, and I was working at Dell. And I was able to transition to where I was doing writing work for Dell. And then I went to Whole Foods corporate office, and I started doing writing work for them. And then when I had the kids, I started doing freelance writing work. And there was this humongous shift, because I'd been kind of in a PR field where instead of typing up a press release and faxing it out, everyone was doing Twitter and blogging and Facebook. And all of a sudden, there was a lot more freedom and a lot less regimented, formulaic recipes to follow. So even the business writing became a creative foray.
I definitely think technology has really allowed people to do things like you do with Maccabee on the Mantle and my podcast, things that we might not have been able to have done 15 or 20 years ago, and certainly when I was growing up in the 70s. So let's talk about Maccabee on the Mantle, and what gave you the idea for that, first of all?
Well, my son, as I said, had matriculated at the Temple preschool until he was 5, and then he graduated, quote unquote graduated, and began kindergarten at our public school, which is wonderful. It's secular, and when he got there, they had the Elf on the Shelf in his classroom, which obviously we did not have at Temple, and all his little friends had it. And every morning they were congregating and talking about the antics their elf had gotten into the night before and comparing stories. And it was really sweet. But Jackson, my little boy, I could sense was feeling left out. And he wanted an elf on the shelf. And I was just like, that's not going to work in our house for a plethora of reasons. A, we didn't have Santa. B, I'm not the kind of mom who'd be on top of that sort of thing. Our elf would disappoint unfailingly, I'm sure. He'd be like, you have the same place for 4 days. But I thought there's got to be an alternative if finding, and again, I think Elf on the Shelf, I think Maccabee on the Mantle, I think these toys are fun, creative outlets for the parents. I think if any of this had happened, say, like you said, 15 years ago, without Facebook, without Instagram, without the ability to share via social media the kind of situation your little doll has ended up in, it wouldn't have the popularity it does now. But because we can share what's happening and people can see it, and it encourages people to get more creative, that's become such a way to facilitate the success of these dolls. So I sort of round answering your question. So my son wanted something like that. His best friend's father, who's my partner in the book, was in the same position, interfaith marriage, more complicated variables to preclude just having an elf in the house. And we partnered up. We were joking about it. We're like, yes, where's our rabbi in the rocker? Where's our this? Where's our that?
The rabbi in the rocker.
Then where's the Maccabee on the Mantle? And we're like, oh, we could do that.
That's funny. I like that.
Yes, it was a nice alignment of the stars.
Did you have any kind of I don't want to say being a lashback or anything, but when you started approaching people with the idea, did they just kind of, give you the old stink eye and wonder exactly what this was all about?
Not at the inception. I would not ever say in the beginning that there was pushback because, well, for one thing, anyone I approached knew me and knew the space I was coming from and that this was something I wanted to do for reasons of really bringing Judaism and the story of Hanukkah in a more palpable way home, and sort of bringing this idea to a place where kids would feel included. What was interesting is this has been going on for years. The Maccabee on the Mantle has. We've been working on this for 5 years, I think. Once we finally got the doll out, though, the doll in the book out, we did have very, very little, but a tiny bit of pushback from people who said, why are you trying to make Jews Christian? And why are you trying to imitate Christmas? And why are you trying to be just like them, quote unquote them? And that was interesting to me because that was really never any of my thought process. I think I always was so enticed and interested in Christmas. I wanted a tree. I wanted the lights, the cookies. I didn't want to be Christian. I just loved all the ceremony and all the fun parts of Christmas. So I thought that was probably not totally unexpected, but an interesting interpretation of people's projection as to what had incentivized me to create this. So it was not a bad pushback. It was pretty gentle, but it was inaccurate. It was an inaccurate interpretation that people had made on their own end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. We had on the other show that I co-host, Supernauts, Sasha Pearl Raver was on, and we were talking about Hanukkah, and I'm not quite sure how we got on the topic, but as a little girl, she didn't hate Hanukkah, but she just thought it was boring. All she had was like dreidels and these little uninspiring gifts, for a few times a year, and lighting the candles on the menorah. And so when I heard about you, I thought about that, and I wonder, how was Hanukkah for you as a kid?
It was good. It was very much like you just described. You have what you have. You have the menorah, you have the latkes, you have the dreidel, and you have the galt. I grew up on the North Shore of Chicago. I grew up in Deerfield, Illinois, so everybody was celebrating Hanukkah, or at least hyper aware of Hanukkah. Here, it's not quite as common. There's several friends of ours who are interfaith, not a lot who are two Jews doing the Hanukkah thing all the way through. So, as I said, I was always so intrigued by Christmas. Again, not that I was wanting to be a Christian person. I thought Christmas was so fun and pretty and sparkly. So I get that. I totally get that. That Pew study that came out last year that cited heightened interfaith marriage and kind of a, how would you say, dilution, I guess, of our pool of Jews and things like that. I remember thinking when I read it, and I read the whole thing top to bottom, if we just all encourage and support how people choose to be Jewish, we'll be in a lot better position. Which brings me back to the little bit of pushback we had where people are like, you're trying to act Christian. No, it's not, but let's just support each other as we grapple through. It's a little bit of a hard time to be Jewish right now. We seem to be having a little rise back in anti-Semitism and things like that. It's such a good time to support each other.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. It's a difficult time to be anything if you're not a white Christian, a straight white Christian, I should say.
Right, totally.
And I want to talk about the videos that you've made, and there's several of them on YouTube, and they are absolutely fantastic. I absolutely
thank you.
I love those videos. They're unique, and they sell the product. And Now, did you write all of those as well?
No, my partner in the book, Dave Wilk of 4-Day Weekend, he is a professional comedian, so he is the one who is the Maccabee. And when he acts, it is all extemporaneous. He's one of those freaky geniuses. He sits up there and he just goes with it. Totally quick on his feet. The one video of two Jews walk into a Christmas party, we did write that collaboratively. Him, me, and our other partner, Frank Ford, and then acted that out. And it's funny because I can't stand watching myself on video. I can't stand hearing myself on tape, in audio, whatever. But I have watched that one video, the two Jews walk into a Christmas party, so many times, even though I'm in it and I don't like that, because I think it is so funny and so sweet and so real. So I appreciate the acknowledgement. Those have been so fun to make, those videos. So fun.
What kind of feedback have you gotten on them?
Great feedback. People either write, like, is this what really happened? Are you professional actors? Where can I see more videos? Can I share the videos? It's been so fun just to put a smile on people's faces, especially in a time of year it can be a little bit stressful. Love hearing back from people. It's all been really, really positive. I feel really honored when people watch the videos.
Yeah, I admit I've watched them several times, except for the one as I mentioned before the show with all the Maccabees in the warehouse. I just find that a little bit too disturbing for me.
I understand. Well, but you have to explain why, because you have a doll phobia.
Well, I write horror, so my mind automatically goes into Stephen King territory when I see something like
that. I totally understand, and like I said, I'm the same way with clowns. So you seeing all those plushes in a warehouse is like me being at the circus. It's just like, Yeah. So that video, you have my blessing.
Thank you. You know, writing a book and getting a book out is an accomplishment in and of itself, and even in today's world of self-publishing and print on demand and whatnot. But adding a plush toy to it must have added a whole new level of insanity.
It really did. It was and it continues to be, the outside of parenthood, the most incredible roller coaster and most intense learning experience of my life, because every time we thought we had everything squared away, some unanticipated variable would float down that we never could have predicted. So all the moving parts, now when I walk into Target or I walk into a little mom and pop toy store or whatever it is, and I see whatever's sitting there, I have such a different perspective, because I know how much blood, sweat, and tears it took to get that yo-yo or whatever it was that we think, or at least I had previously thought, just kind of magically appeared. No. There's so much to do just to make everything happen. It is crazy.
What does it take to make something like that happen? I'm curious about that.
Go ahead.
I mean, how did you start? I mean, I know you had the idea for the plushie, but how do you go from an idea of having a plushie with a book to actually getting a company to make it? I suppose that's how it happens.
Well, I'll give you as succinct an answer as I can, because this has been 5 years or more in the making. We had the idea. I went home. I wrote the book. We went back and forth a couple times on the book. My partners at 4-Day Weekend, they had never made a toy either, but they have a book called The Art of Improvising, Zen, and they had previously published that book, so they knew that route. But what we wanted to do was get an agent, and we got an agent right away, which my understanding is it's generally extremely challenging to do.
Yeah, that's
to get an agent.
That's a needle in the haystack type of thing.
Yes, so we were very lucky, and the agent was wonderful, but the concept was starting to veer away from our vision, and we weren't as comfortable relinquishing, I guess, the creative control. We felt like we had to compromise. So we decided not to go with the agent after all, after about a year or so working together, maybe not that long, I can't remember anymore exactly. But we're like, let's talk to people who are in the toy business. So we went to people we know from East Dallas, who my business partners at 4-Day Weekend had a relationship with, who do make toys, and they loved the idea, thought it was a great concept, and decided they would like to work with us. And it was a perfect marriage because they had the toy making experience, I had the writing experience. 4-Day Weekend had book release and essentially production experience. So we began that journey, all of us working together, and that's when we started finding out about, oh, you make prototypes, oh, you design a doll. Well, then that we needed an illustrator, all that kind of stuff. So at that point, my relationship with Temple Emmanuel came in very handy, because then I wanted to start working with the rabbis, because I wanted the book to be historically accurate. I wanted the illustrations to be appropriate. I wanted the doll to look like a Maccabee would, sort of, as we can extrapolate. So so there were so many moving parts. There were so many variables. That's the shortest little Reader's Digest version of how we got from there to here.
Did you ever stop and just look around and think, oh my Lord, what have I got myself into?
Yes. Without hesitation, yes. All the time. I thought it was going to be so easy. I was like, how hard could it be? You write a book, you make a doll, you put it in a box. and then someone goes in front of you and they're like, all right, we have 74 options of packaging we'd like you to look at. And there's an A, B, and C facet to each option. And I'm such a Libra. I can't make a decision to save my life to begin with on a good day. So it so many times, never in a bad way, but I would definitely like sit and laugh at myself. What am I doing here? What am I doing in a warehouse in a fulfillment center with a hard hat on? I'm so confused.
You mentioned the rabbis when you were talking about making the dolls and get everything put together. How much of a part of writing the book were they? And who were they?
Well, so my main rabbi, Rabbi Adam Allenberg, who was with Temple Emmanuel in Dallas and also in a small Jewish world, I don't need like step brother-in-law to my partner Dave. Anyway, he was really the most significant helper I had from the temple. He went page by page by page with me to make sure I had the phraseology correct. He went through each illustration to make sure the pictures were accurate. So, for instance, the menorah has 8 candles because of the 8 days of Hanukkah, and then the Shamash. But the original candelabra in the temple was not set up that way. So he showed that to me and then explained, because I certainly would never be so presumptuous as to call myself any kind of Jewish scholar. And he patiently, with a fine-tooth comb, just went through every single part of it. And then another rabbi, Amy Ross at Temple, she went through the prayer with me, because my Hebrew was nothing to write home about, and made sure that was accurate, because we really wanted the prayer in the back of the book. The preschool director, Shelley Sender, was amazing. All the Temple preschool teachers who read Hanukkah books for their whole career to these children gave me their feedback. it was so wonderful. It was such a village to build this book, and everyone helped so much, and I just felt so supported and so encouraged. It was almost like whatever happened in the book from a marketing commercial standpoint was secondary because I felt good about it. I felt like it could be in a temple classroom, teach the story of Hanukkah accurately to children in a non-scary way, because it's essentially a story about a war, and that's scary. And there's soldiers in it, and that can be scary when you're talking about little 2 and 3 year olds. So I felt like this is curriculum. This is educational material. No matter what else happens, this is going to make kids happy, and it's going to educate them. And that is ultimately really what I wanted.
How do you walk the line of telling the story of Hanukkah, which does have war and soldiers, and kind of temper it to the audience that you're trying to tell it to, without giving them the heebie-jeebies in the middle of the night?
That's a very intelligent question, Scott. We really, at that point, having 2 small children and my partner having children and me having taught in a temple classroom for so long was paramount, because I was able to see things from the perspective of the future audience of the book. So we really wanted to make the emphasis of the story on standing up for yourself, which it's never too early to teach the kids,
Absolutely.
right? On making a declaration of what is right. So King Antiochus was telling the Jews, you can't worship your God, you need to worship my God. And the Jews said, no, we're not going to listen to you. This is our right. We are going to choose how we worship, how we pray. So we positioned all that in a very topical, matter-of-fact way. And then when it came time to illustrate the book, I don't know how familiar you are with children's books, but in general nowadays they tend to be very bright colors, very sharp lines. And we sort of kicked it back to old school because I wanted watercolors and soft lines, and I wanted it to have this sort of dreamlike effect where if the kids saw it, it A, looked a little more like art, but B, looked a little more abstract and not something that would be searing into their brain about this bright, colorful, shocking war scene. So we had this amazing illustrator, Ivana Escalante, and I just said to him, I said, I want it all to just be pretty. And I know that's a weird thing to say when you're illustrating a war, but I want it to be safe, and I want it to be pretty, and I want it to be dreamlike. And I thought he did an amazing job.
Wow, that's a really fantastic way of going about it. Because I think
Thank
I
you.
think you're right. If you have the harsh lines and the really bright, vivid colors, that's going to give a child a very different impression than if you have something soft and dreamlike.
Well, it's been interesting because over the last several years, there's been a shift in a lot of the thinking in preschools to this, what's called a Reggio style of education. So instead of walking into that kind of romper room, bright primary colors, tons of plastic toys, that fluorescent lights, the carpet with the numbers, it's all red and blue and green, and they've done research where if children are in a more natural setting, natural woods, soft greens, beiges, less stimuli, they're more readily available to absorb what they're learning, and they're more focused. And it makes so much sense if you think about it, just how you might feel in a bright red, orange, green room versus outside or in the woods or in a spa-like serene setting. And I felt lucky to be privy to that research, because when it came time to do the book, that's what I was thinking. I want it to penetrate on a cerebral level and not distract by bright colors. Not saying anything pejorative about bright colors. There's certainly a place for them. But in my book, that research kept coming into my head, and I was like, there's a place for that right now, just to make it soft and safe.
Was there something about Hanukkah as you going through this book that you didn't know or that you were surprised about?
Let me think a second. Well, not about Hanukkah directly, but I am in a Reformed temple, and I'm in an interfaith marriage, and Reform is just suits me best. It's far and away the less rigid of the way to practice that is appropriate for me and my family. And there were some things I didn't know that the rabbis educated me on. So we had a line in the book where the Jews say to King Antiochus, we're going to worship him as we choose, with a capital H, I am, about God. And the rabbi said, we don't assign a gender to God in the Reformed temple. It's just say worship God as we choose, not him or her or he or she, because it's not part of our beliefs, essentially, to say God's male or whatever. And as I said, when I was growing up, it was always him and he and stuff like that. And I think in conservative and Orthodox it still is. I'm not sure. I can't really speak to that. But that was the kind of thing, A, I thought was super cool, and B, I didn't know and might not have known if I ever found out, if I hadn't been consulting with the rabbis through that.
That is interesting, because at least most Western religions, I guess I should say, seem to have a somewhat patriarchal ideology to them, and so to hear that there's no gender assigned, that's pretty progressive. That's
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. It made me proud. I was like, well, that makes sense, and I love that. And if it doesn't resonate with some people, that's okay too. It happened to speak to me, and I thought that was great.
Is there anything, looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Probably. I I probably would have done a few things differently, but I only know those things with the gift of hindsight. I could not. A couple things happened along the way that I couldn't have predicted, and I've sort of gotten to where I don't let myself think too hard in terms of the book or in life in general about what I could have done differently, because I feel like it really takes me away from where I am in the moment. And I'm such an easily distracted creature to begin with. I work extra hard to be present. So I've felt myself going down that path a few times, like, well, if we had done this, da-da-da, and then I stop myself and I rein it in and I say, okay, this right now is where I am, and I don't even know what that's going to mean in 20 years. I just have to have faith we're all going to be making the best of it. So but I just don't let myself go there too much.
And what has the whole process changed about you as a person?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that at all. I think it's been a very, now that you ask that, I think it's just occurring to me for the first time. It's actually been an extremely liberating process, and it's been a healing process, because I have had a couple incidents in my life during my sort of, I guess you'd say, religious journey that have been very hard for me to process. For instance, I got married at 24, so I've been married 16 years. And at the time, my husband and I could not find a rabbi who was willing to marry us. My husband was not going to convert, and it wasn't because he's super religious, nor was it because he had any issue with Judaism. He thinks Judaism is wonderful, and he felt like it would be disrespectful to convert just for the sake of converting. so he facilitates us raising the kids Jewish. He takes them to Sunday school. He does all that, but he does it in his own terms. And I felt like when we couldn't find a rabbi willing to marry us, it was super hurtful to me. I took it personally, even though it wasn't about me per se. It felt like that. So as I wrote this book, I had some healing happen in terms of things like that, where I felt like perhaps I wasn't being as accepted as I wished by my own religion, which brings me back to what I had said before about we just have to meet people where they are and respect how everyone chooses to practice. I consider myself a good Jewish mom, quote unquote good Jewish mom, and I don't find the fact that my husband is not Jewish to interfere or intercede in that in any way, shape, or form. And then in terms of sort of the other way I would say it changed me is you and I were talking before the show about how sometimes it feels like when people are listening to you or watching you, you can't always be as much yourself, or you have to censor yourself, or you have to predict how people are going to interpret what you say. And I have, through this journey, gotten to a point where I feel a little freer than I used to. I'm not apologizing anymore for how I married outside the religion, or if I say something that people don't think is mom appropriate, which trust me happens all the time. and that has been incredibly freeing to me, to get to a point where I had to come to terms with the fact that even though I am personally a serial people pleaser, I am not going to be able to make everybody happy regardless. And so I have to be genuine and authentic and hope that works for people. But I want my kids to know that too. Be who you are and don't try to shift because of what other people are going to think, because that's what other people think of you is really none of your business anyway.
Exactly.
So that's been I feel like I've grown up a lot. It's weird because I'm 40. Maybe I just had a lot of maturing up to do, but
hey, I'm almost 50.
Sure,
I'm almost 50 and I'm still growing up, so.
Good. Well, looks like you're doing a good job.
And how have your kids reacted to the book and the plushie? How do they like it?
They love it. My kids hide it from each other. So the way it works in our house is our Maccabee is not magic. They take turns. They hide it. They come up with their own little scenarios. Sometimes they work in conjunction with one another. Sometimes it's more, okay, I'm going to hide it. You try to find it. But I think it has been fun for them. I think it's been cool for them seeing me do it. And I think it's been nice for them because I am at home with the kids, so they really saw almost every step of the way. Me on the computer, me wrapping them up with my own hands, me making the phone calls, me really happy and excited, me really anxious or stressed out. They've gotten to see this whole process. So when they create something of their own, they sort of know this is part of it. And I think that's been great for them.
That's very cool. And final question is, what would you want people to take away from Hanukkah? What's the most important message? And I think I know the answer to this from what you said earlier, but I'm going to ask the question anyway.
No, I love that you're asking the question. To me, the story of Hanukkah, in a nutshell, it's gotten, I guess, because it happens at the same time as Christmas, and it's really not the biggest Jewish holiday by any means, it's gotten maybe a little less emphasized than I think it could be. But what's really amazing to me about Hanukkah is that the Jews were being oppressed. Obviously, long history of oppression. But the Jews were being oppressed. They were being told they had to worship differently than they believed, than what was real in their hearts. And even though there were far less Jews and the odds were insurmountably against them being victorious, they persevered. They fought with their hearts. They followed their hearts, and they were able to continue to pray and worship in the way that was authentic and real and true to them. And I think about that with my kids all the time. You're always going to have people who are telling you you're not doing it right. There's going to be incidences of bullying. That's obviously it's such a topic on everybody's mind right now. And all you can do is be true to yourself and forge ahead. And when you do that, you really set yourself up for success. And the last line in the book is, enjoy this special time with your Maccabee around, for he is here to remind you that miracles abound. And that was what I wanted everyone to take away from it. Be true to yourself, stand up for yourself. Miracles can happen.
And that's a perfect message for anybody, young or old.
Oh, thank you.
And people can get their own Maccabee on the Mantle at your website at MaccabeeOnTheMantle.com, correct?
Yes, and we have it on Amazon. It's in Hallmark stores. It's in a bunch of temple gift shops and JCCs and little mom and pop stores. It's all over, but probably the most orders are coming in through MaccabeeOnTheMantle.com.
Well, we'll make sure to put a link for it up on the website when the show goes live. And do you have any other, outside of Maccabee on the Mantle, do you have any other projects that you have or books that you're working on?
We are working on a couple other children's books, and we are in the process of just trying to decide exactly what we want to narrow the scope on, because we have so many ideas all the time that we need to rein it in a little bit. So I think we keep coming back to this idea of the message for kids right now that's so important, is just to stand up for yourself and to stand up for what's right. And that's really what we want to center things around with the next project. It's now that my kids are 11 and 9, I've been exposed to this whole crazy social media via the kids, cyber, all that. And it's so interesting to me, the kind of challenges and obstacles kids face now that they didn't when you and I were growing up. So really everything we're honing in on for the future is coming back to a message about just taking good care of yourself, standing up for yourself, standing up for others, just doing the right thing to help everybody, to take care of each other.
I know I said that last question was the last question, but now you got me curious about something, and it has nothing to do with Maccabee on the Mantle. It just has to do with, as a parent, how do you, I don't want to say shield your kids from some of the stuff that goes on social media, but how do you do that? I mean, there's like a fine line between allowing them to experience something that they need to experience, but also trying to keep the bad stuff away. That has to be hard to do.
It is really hard to do. And what I have discovered is that the more I create a space where my children are comfortable asking me when they see something that they're confused about or doesn't look right to them, the better off we are. Because at first I had all these parameters. My son just got his first phone a few months ago, and I had all these parameters, and I had all these blocks, and I had all this. It doesn't matter what you do. Things infiltrate that you really didn't want your kid to see. And so the best thing for me, for us in our family, has been just to constantly be dialoguing about that and just saying, okay, I know this is confusing to you, or I know this makes you uncomfortable. Let's talk about it a second, because as much as I'd like to think this is the last time you will ever see it, it's not. So we can't change what you're going to see, but what we can do is set you up to interpret it in a safe space, to process it in a healthy way, to not be scared, to figure out how you can best cope with these things, even when they are totally uncomfortable. And it's been pretty much a good thing to see my son stumbling across something or seeing a picture on Instagram that has a mean hashtag and clicking on that and not being like, why would someone do this? Why would someone make fun of someone like that? Why would someone take a picture of someone when they didn't know they were getting a picture taken of them and post it when it's so mean? And we can talk about it and then say, okay, I know that's terrible. That sucks, right, Jackson? Tell me how that made you feel. Tell me what you'd do if that was you. Tell me what you'd do if that was a friend of yours. And then I feel like I just set him up to cope with it on his own when that time comes. My daughter not so much, because she doesn't have a phone, so she doesn't see quite as much.
Does she go on the internet at all? Is she into the social media, or is she still a little bit too young for that?
She gets on Pinterest a lot because she likes to play on Hanukkah parties and look up cookies. And interestingly, up to this point, she has not stumbled across anything she didn't need to see. I mean, it's coming, of course. It's going to happen. So I feel like my kids are only 2 years apart. They're exactly 2 years apart. So I feel like she sees what's happening with Jackson. She hears us talking. She asks questions. And in some ways, I think she'll be a little better prepared. But the difference between girls and boys is the other thing, because some of what these girls see or even post about themselves is shocking to me, these young girls. So you probably know this because I couldn't even figure out how to Skype in with you. I'm not the most technically savvy person in the entire universe, but I'm trying to be really on top of that stuff so my kids can always talk to me. And I just always come back to that. Like, you can tell me anything. You can ask me anything. I won't be mad at you. It's not your fault if you went on this. Even if you searched for it and you found something that made you uncomfortable or freaked out, let's talk about that. You won't get in trouble. I need to know so I can help you.
I think that's probably the best way to go about it. I mean, particularly in this day and age with the 24-hour access to internet and information. I mean, this stuff is bound to come up, and you can't blame the kids for seeing it or being curious enough to look something up.
No, you really can't. And when I was growing up, when I was in high school, I remember so distinctly one time my mom said to me, if you are at a party you're not supposed to be at, or you're out too late or whatever, and the person you're supposed to ride with, because I have a late birthday and I was like the last person to be driving, she's like, and the person you're supposed to ride with is drunk, call me. You will never get in trouble. And it was just one exchange, and I don't even know how much she remembers of it or whatever, but it was just a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to be safe inside my mistakes. All these things I mess up constantly. Like, I can still reach out for help. And that's what I want for my kids. And I tell them now, like, someday, when this happens, when someone's drinking this, that, it's okay. Even if you're not where you're supposed to be or you're not where you said you'd be, if you're in danger, don't let the fear of getting in trouble inhibit you from reaching out to us. So, I don't know. I feel like my parents did that for me, and I really want to do that for my kids.
Well, that's some good parenting on your parents' part. Mine was if you're not home on time, you're getting an ass kicking.
I assure you, my parents weren't perfect. Nor am I. Super imperfect.
Oh, aren't we all?
But it looks like you turned out quite well. So
I do my best.
so maybe the ass kicking's the right route.
Abe, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate your coming on today.
It's been so great.
And
Scott, it's been so great talking to you. Thank you. Such insightful questions. I've done a bunch of interviews, and you had me really thinking a few times, like, whoa, I didn't even contemplate that.
well, thank you. I try and use that term that I don't like either. Think outside the box, because I know you've got a publicist, and I know that you've been sent on interviews and have been asked 1,000 questions, and they're all the same. And I just try and do something different.
No, I appreciate
Mix it
that.
up for people. And
It made it very interesting. I learned talking to you. I learned.
well, good. Then I did my job right.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you can find links to order Maccabee on the Mantle at our website at thesupernauts.com. And if you like Imaginarium, please check out the other shows we have on our network. There's something for everyone, and all are guaranteed to entertain. Until next time, may all your journeys be filled with pure imagination.